You're listening to Go Back and Get It, a Sankofa audio journey. This is episode 3, Race, History, and the Educational Impact.
So, Michael Emerson, Rice University, I'm wondering how you all experienced today, if anything stood out.
This is hard to answer. I'm Glenn Bracey, Associate Professor of Sociology at Villanova University. I am struggling, to be honest with you, about how I'm going to go back to my classroom and teach. Brian Stevenson told a story last night about being in the courtroom and the judge and the prosecutor laughing at him. And him having, for the sake of his client, to find a way to smile and laugh too. And I teach social movements. So when I come back to the classroom, and it would be one thing if my classroom was all students of color, right? And I could give the full weight of, or at least frankly, to be honest, it's not even the full weight. It's the anger that I feel. I could express that. I could help them express that. And we could work through that together. But I am struggling with how to convey anger in an educational way, or what the educational value is of my anger for my white students. I don't know. And I do not want to have to smile and laugh and nod just for the sake of keeping my job, right? So it's very difficult. It's one thing when I'm teaching, I'm solely concerned about moving my students from where they are to the next place in their intellectual development. But this experience, just the vastness of the experience, the number of things that we saw, the size of the monuments, the depth of the history, being at EJI and seeing the jail portion where you walk up and you answer the phone and speak like you're speaking to someone who's, condemned. The magnitude of all of that, I can't convey. And I feel like the magnitude has so much of the power in it. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm glad that I have a few days to sit and think it through, because I really don't know how to me, teaching is a service. It's a ministry of itself. And I do not know how to best minister to my white students after this. I don't.
Maybe we need to create a course that does this. You do readings 1 week here and then back for reflection and working on papers. And yeah.
I'm Khanh Nguyen. I was at University of Northwestern, St. Paul and Bethel University for a combined almost 20 years. So I just got out of a situation. And actually I left both universities because of issues of justice and race that I didn't feel were being handled right. So I can empathize with anger, but I don't think I'm going to return to Christian higher ed because I've had enough. I need to move on, but I can speak from what we have tried to do with I was in campus ministries. I was an adjunct in the Bible and Christian ministries department, teaching some courses on race and culture as well as Bible. And then I was in a diversity position. So I'm more of the student life experience. And we did do a Sankofa trip with Northwestern, and we had been planning, Phil had been doing some too, and we wanted to revisit a Sankofa trip. So I was kind of hoping to do something like this for our students. So if we can create more real experiences for our students, I think these immersive experiences rather than just talking about it in the classroom, so they know what it's like and so they feel the weight of it. Cause it's so weighty. Like I only nap once a day. I needed a nap after every, visitation because it was so heavy on the emotion, so taxing. So our students need to feel the weight of the reality of our history. And they don't see that experience that just by reading a book. So if we can create immersive experiences for them.
I'm Jennifer Ackerman. I'm assistant professor of preaching at Fuller Seminary, and I direct the Brem Preaching Lloyd John Ogilvie Institute of Preaching. I think that I should say I'm a white person. And so everything that we've experienced today is something I don't have personal familial ties to, and I know about it. on an intellectual level, on an academic level. I wrote a dissertation on Howard Thurman, the spiritual father of the civil rights movement. So I've dug into these things, but before I stood there and read names I've never heard of and saw faces I'd never seen before and saw art and, like you said, Glenn, picking up the phone and listening to the stories of incarcerated people, I felt things in a way that I never could have otherwise. I was thinking a lot about preachers are always looking for an illustration and a story to tell. And I was like, that's not what I'm getting out of this. I'm not walking away with stories to tell. I'm walking away feeling the stories of others. And I'm thinking, Glenn, about you and how are you going to teach this? And I mean, I don't know, but I try to teach preachers, you need to have experiences that form you, and then that will find its way into your preaching. And it's not about the actual story you tell, but as you're changed, it will influence the way you give voice to the things you're experiencing. And I think that's going to be true for you in your teaching too. And I think people are so hungry for authentic voices right now. And the more we can bring those experiences of what we've seen and felt into what we're actually speaking and teaching and preaching, the better it's going to be for everybody. And the last thing I'll say, when we were in Africa Town, was that yesterday? I was so moved at the very end of that tour, learning about the descendants from the Clotilda slave ship and the tour guide saying, you are a memory keeper. And now you've learned these memories, but also you have memories. And that's what we're doing as teachers, as educators, as preachers. We're memory keepers and trying to figure out how does this human experience merge with the experience of the word and how will that form people and how is it forming us? And so it's something you have to feel. And so I've just been feeling it a lot on this trip.
Vanya Gomez, the Fuller Center for Spiritual Formation. So I'm not actually in academia, but academia adjacent because we are part of Fuller Seminary. And I've just been thinking a lot because what we do is I particularly help train and prepare pastors and leaders for our missions organizations to be able to lead cohorts in their spaces and contextualize the spiritual formation material for the people that they know. I'm at a loss for words at how am I supposed to prepare someone to do something? How can I take these experiences from this week and help someone view spiritual formation through the lens of justice without having them, because there's no way I can have them experience a week like this, prep a course and have them come spend a week here. And then, okay, now that you've experienced this, here's how you can have this be translated into your space and for your people. I can't do that. It's something that I'm preparing them for best practices. But my thought is, how can we take the material that's going to go beyond someone that can afford seminary or afford university and their company maybe has offered them the opportunity to come to a year-long spiritual formation practice? And how can we help the people leading these cohorts to be able to be sensitive to the unique experience of each participant and be able to listen to the stories in order to involve this much needed element of race and justice that I think we often miss within spiritual formation?
Paul Thompson. I am a professor of history at North Greenville University in Greenville, South Carolina. So I teach undergrad students earning bachelor's in history or social studies education degrees to be high school history teachers. Certainly one of the underlying themes these last few days has been bemoaning the fact that, quote, people don't know this history. So for me, I've been a lifelong educator and I taught grades 7 to 12 for 13 years before I became a university professor. So I've given a lot of thought of the question is, when should people learn this information? And of course, the next question is, once you learn it, then what? Right. The other thing that has come up is that Andy has talked a lot about one of his words he's used is look for echoes. And we have our sayings out there that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes or similar kinds of statements are in circulation among historians and academics. I guess, Glenn, I heard you saying, you don't know what you're going to do when you go back to the classroom. One of the things that's a struggle for me is that I just feel an increasing compulsion to make connections in the classroom between the history and the present, because there's a lot of citizens in our society who either don't know the history or don't know really, the connections are not self-evident in terms of how they act as citizens in a republic, in a democracy, their civic behavior. And I just feel a greater moral weight. But this is like the ultimate challenge of a historian, right? There's always more and more to teach because time keeps moving on, but we still only have 15-week semesters. You teach online, you might have an 8-week semester, 8-week course. So I don't know how to build in the connections to the present and talk about the echoes. How do you do that appropriately, whether it be the volume of time, the amount of time you spend, or whether it be even which echoes you choose? Because I still have to cover that history. I still have to teach that history. So I teach a course on Africa and the slave trade. I teach a course on, right now I'm teaching African American history to 1877. And I'm been teaching less frequently recently. And so the last time I taught Africa and the slave trade had been, usually it was like a 2-year rotation. It'd been a 2-year rotation for me for a few years, for a while. And then I've gotten out of that rotation because of administrative appointment. And I got so excited about adding so much to that African slave trade course that the last time I taught it, I really, I was putting too much in because I was so excited to add all this new stuff I had learned, talking about lament psalms, and bringing this to bear. I'm at a Christian university. And so, it's just like, I can't add any more to the course. So what am I taking out? And so this is just, I don't think there's ever any solution to this dilemma. It's just going to become more and more problematic because there's no more minutes to teach.
Can I quick comment on what you're saying about connecting the past to the present? Because there were times when I was going through stuff that I was connecting the past to the present. And because I'm from the Twin Cities and the ice raids and metro surge, and I have never been more proud to be a Minnesotan. I could care less about saying I'm a Minnesotan because I consider myself a Vietnamese American. And why am I still in this state? It's so darn cold. But yeah, for the first time, I was proud to be a Minnesotan. I mean, I was proud in George Floyd too, when we resisted. Andy's always asking us, look for the resistance. And so the treatment of the detainees and the immigrants is very similar. The echoes of how slaves were treated but we can be part of that resistance. And so I just feel like there are things in the present we can connect the past to. Thank you for your comments on that.
So putting together things I'm learning from you all, and I'm also going to put on my former provost hat, where instead of thinking about individual courses, I'm thinking about how are our different courses linking together for a holistic learning. And also then my experience, I've tried different ways of teaching. The most common way is somebody stands up there and lectures and students take notes and then they tell us what they learned and the reason that's the most common is it's easiest. Mm-hmm. It's the most efficient. But my next level of learning and teaching was experiential learning. So if I'm teaching a race course, let's all go outside and we're going to do the race, just called the race. If you are white, take 2 steps forward. If you are anything else, take 2 steps backwards. You've probably heard of this by now. Mm-hmm. And students learn an amazing amount just looking at where they're all standing before we race. And then we race. And then I reward the people that had to go 4 feet because they achieved victory and they learn. That's wonderful. Then I went in one year and taught over in Copenhagen, Denmark, and they have a different model and they've built it in. Everything is what the term you use, Khanh, immersive. So if you're learning about the city, you actually have to be out in the city. And they build it in that for 1 week, you go to another city and you learn everything about that city. And then for another week, you go to 2 other cities. And so you're just immersed in it. That's what we're experiencing. The deepest kind of learning there is. You can't probably do it in one course, but you could do it over a design of a major or a whole education. That's something where in higher ed, we've got to change. We've got to have more immersive teaching. Other thoughts for folks?
One theme that I was talking about, I appreciate what you're saying about immersive teaching, and I appreciate what you're talking about around the students needing like the threads and the echoes that you're going to pull up, right? But one of the things that I said at the top is that I think it's a different experience for students of color than it is for white students. And serving, like, how do I orient my class to be maximally beneficial for all the students is a real question. I certainly don't want to cater to the white students by displaying all of our pain and saying, but you're good people, so you're going to do something good about it, right? And playing an implicit racist game, right? Of, us serving white education again. I don't want to ignore my white students. I don't want to lose faith in them that they could learn, right? But I don't know how to I don't know where they start from, to be completely honest. And I have a better sense of where most of my students of color are starting from. Sure. And so I have a better sense of how they will experience the immersion and the emotion and the weight, that comes along with these things. So I'd be very curious to hear how you all think.
Well, I can tell you one thing is that it was shocking to me to realize to be schooled by Black and brown pastors in some of our multicultural programs that if there is one white person in the group, it will completely change the dynamic because everything now is built around making that white person comfortable. Yeah. And I think, is that what I'm hearing? Some of what's going on for you in your classroom, which I mean, thank you. I mean, I can't speak to what it will mean for your job or how white people who sign your paychecks will respond. But I mean, I would hope, as if I were a student in your class, that the first thing would be helping me understand that's the dynamic that you have to wrestle with. And that I, as a student in your class, have some kind of power that I don't know I have and maybe don't want, or at least I don't know I want it. And so it's not your job to teach me that, but also I don't know it. So I don't know if there's some way that if we can understand what some of those barriers are that we don't know are there. I don't know what that would change, how that might change it. I just know if I was that student, it would be very eye-opening and I would listen in a different way. And I think I would understand your pain in a different way. So I don't know. I don't know, for whatever it's worth, it's been very helpful to me to even just know that when I'm in the room, it's going to be different, and try to learn what I can do to decenter myself so that a truer conversation can happen.
So, Glenn, on your concern, I have a couple thoughts. One is I teach at a predominantly white institution, which I think you do too. This semester, I'm shocked. I have 2 African-American students in my African-American history class. 2 out of 10, which is shocking. Normally, it's 1 or none if I teach African slave trade or African-American history. Frequently, the only African-American in the room. So, this is where my dilemma is. So I taught in a secular context, in a non-religious context like you, at the secondary level, and now I'm teaching at the university level in a Christian, explicitly evangelical context. What is supposed to be occurring in a Christian institution of higher ed is that we are all on the same page with our filters and with our value systems and with our morality and with our understanding of how the world and the universe operates and how it got here and why it's here, and that there is ultimate purpose and meaning, and God creates that, and if you will, a biblical anthropology, an understanding of who we are. That's what's supposed to happen. So, of course, institutions of Christian higher ed very imperfectly execute that, sadly. I think from my perspective, my goal is to try to get my institution to execute it as well as it can, be the best version of itself it can be. And from that perspective, we think about what we heard Brian Stevenson say last night. I mean, while he was talking on Micah 6:8, he kept zooming out into all the prophets, right? So there's that whole section of the Bible that white evangelicals generally omit and spend very little time discussing. But in my context, even though that's true, very broadly speaking, accurate, I can still bring those passages up in the framework because we do all say that we're operating within a biblical, we're trying to understand and apply a biblical worldview. So the options are a little different in a Christian context, or they should be a little different than in a secular context. I often feel when I taught in a public school, I sort of kind of, it's like you can take the horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. Like I could only teach so far, and then I had to stop in terms of the moral or ethical or, eternal ramifications of what I was conveying.
Just as a quick clarification, Villanova is a Catholic university. So I too am in a Christian context, just not an evangelical one.
So I have two stories, but I first want to acknowledge that it's hard. It sucks. So Lord have mercy. But I play this game in my race class and workshops. It's a board game, sort of, that was created by Feeding the Hungry or some hunger ministry. And you're assigned a role. So you're supposed to pick. Normally, you pick either white or black. So if you're white, you pick the black card, right? And so you read 10 cards of history of systemic racism. And so each card is like, let's say the Indian Removal Act, or, well, that's bad because that's a bad example because, well, no, it was. Let's say like Jim Crow laws or mass incarceration, right? And so if you're black, you lose, there's 3 cards: lose opportunity, lose land, and a money card. So you either gain money or lose money, or you gain an opportunity card or you lose a opportunity card. At the end of the game, after all these 12 systemic racism things, it turns out that the black people have $13. $1 or $0. And the white people have 13. And that's exactly the ratio, 1 to 13. So it's kind of a simulation game. So it puts you in, oh my gosh, you teach the systemic history and it wakes you up because, oh my gosh, how do you feel as a black person if you're white? Like, man, that sucked. But it was a game. I was wanting to bring more money, but then I ended up with nothing, right? So it teaches them disparities in kind of a fun educational way. The second story I have is I was teaching a 4-week course on culture for adults, adult continuing education. And we were going through the book by Soon-Chan Ra. I think it's like Many Colors or something. So it's only 4 weeks. And so he starts off with the biblical case for culture and then talks more about, differences in culture. And then like the 9th chapter talks about systemic history. So I pace the kids, right? These are adults. So biblical cultures, I always teach culture first because it's fun to talk about culture. It's harder to talk about race. So the second week, we start getting into systemic issues, like just a touch on it. One white guy comes up and goes, Professor, I've been discriminated against. This black guy got a job because he was black and I didn't get that job. And I just didn't answer him. I said, Lord, I'm just going to pray. I'm just going to pray that just continue, keep the course, keep stand on the course. He'll read more about systemic history and all that, or systemic injustice. The next week he comes to me and he goes, Professor, I didn't know all this history that happened in the U.S. And now I realize that I could have gotten a job because I was white. And I just like, light bulb on. Thank you, Jesus. I didn't do anything, but just like, please, Lord, teach him through the course. So we just got to remain on the course and trust the Lord. And it doesn't always turn out that way, but Lord have mercy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm reminded a week ago, I was in Alaska. I'm on a board of a college designed specifically for Alaskan natives as the highest % Alaskan native in the country. And an Alaskan native pulled me aside and said this: when a white person is in the room, we always as Alaskan natives think, something we don't. And so we get quiet and we defer and we don't speak. And I think that's a challenge for all of us, right? That I've just noticed this among my students. I noticed this among white people in church. We are just way overconfident. I noticed this when we lived in Europe. I would ask people in Europe, what are your stereotypes of Americans? And they're talking about white Americans. They said they're loud. Wherever they are, they take the space as if it is theirs. And when we lived there, we started to see that. Like you're in a foreign place and you're just claiming it. And you complain if it doesn't have what you are used to and your kitchens are too small. Anyway, I think that's such a challenge in teaching, as you say, when we have diverse classes. How do we make sure that everybody learns and is able to bring what they know and not be intimidated by what they think others know?
If we think about how Jesus taught his disciples, it's totally not the model that higher ed has. You know what I mean? Or even education. And we don't just sitting in a classroom showing PowerPoints and testing. You're living life. We're just following him around from city to city, living life, learning. Yeah. So it's like, disciple how Jesus discipled life, just living life together and learning through life. And this is learning through life.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I interrupted by saying, and Jesus gave them tasks, right? He sent them out to do, specific things. So they had this immersion, experience. The difficulty I have, because I would like to approach my job like a discipler, but Jesus calls them first and they receive the call, right? And my students haven't been called necessarily and haven't necessarily responded to a call. So I'm not always sure that I have permission to disciple in that way.
But you have permission to educate them.
Yes.
And called to receive an education, and you can shape their education.
But additionally, I work with people who say they have a call, and it's not easier. You know, it's like pastors and like mission organization leaders and directors and these people that are supposed to be leading and forming lives. And that's their desire, right? And in a classroom, they're there usually, hopefully, because they want to be there and they want to learn and they signed up for this course, whether it was required or whether they wanted to, because they're trying to get to an ultimate goal. And so I think one of the challenges that we have, whether we're training or educating or whatever we want to call it, discipling, thanks, Khanh, like we have the challenge to meet people where they are. And as leaders that are training people, we are meeting a large group of people where they are, and we're trying to figure that out in a small amount of time. I think that's a challenge, but I think it's also what Jesus did. Jesus met people where they were. And so our calling as trainers, educators, or whatever we are, is to be able to say, where you are, you can keep going forward from here.
Yeah,
let's not
good.
go backwards.
And I think as we learn how to do that, that's going to be, we need to, as we learn how to do that, that's a journey. So, I mean, we're never going to arrive. I don't think it's not a journey we're ever going to arrive. It's not a destination we're going to arrive at. So however we do that better next week or next month, hopefully in 2, 3, 5 years, we're going to do it better. And in 10 years, we'll do it better. I mean, we're never going to get there. So in some regards, we have to cut ourselves a little slack, but in another regards, not. I mean, persist. Let's continue. It's a journey, and just lean into that and accept that with the tensions that come with that and with the constant striving and never being fully satisfied with what we've achieved. I think we have to just lean into that.
One last thing I'll say quick. I went to seminary 20 years ago, so I had to check this on Google to make sure I was right. But do you know what the word disciple in Greek means? Learner. So whether you use learner or disciple, your students are learning from you. So you are, in a sense, discipling them.
I was just going to say, after hearing Paul talk, I think one of the things we can do as educators is to set our students up to find the Sankofa journeys that they can go on wherever they are. And you don't have to do a curated experience like this, because learning people's stories, learning, being a memory keeper, learning the reality of people's lives is wherever we are. And how do we go on that journey and get out of our own myopic little bubbles so that we can experience through other people's eyes wherever we are?
What you're talking about is a learning posture. You're talking about a lifestyle. I think of the word humility last night as we heard Brian Stevenson exegete that verse, but particularly the last, he said, walk humbly with thy God is how you have to doing justice through a humility framework. That's how you love mercy humbly. So humility in that humble posture enables you to learn, like you said, without being on a formally curated journey. Just listen to people around you. Put yourself, life, God will often put us around people of diverse life experiences. So it's the posture we have when we're exposed. You can learn by example without direct instruction.
I would have loved to have seen what discussion we would have had before we began this Sankofa. One of the things I think that's been so powerful, and I would encourage anybody that's listening, is that we can have this discussion together because we've done this immersion and it's profoundly influencing us. And, actually having us rethink how we want to do education. So I would encourage anybody else that's giving thought to that. You've got to go through it. Just as Jennifer said, whether that's going on the one that we are through the South or if that's in the city you're in, you really need to do it. I always use an example with students. If a general is leading a group of people into a war, if I'm a soldier, I want to know that that general has fought in a war before. Or I am not going to feel very confident or trust that general. It's the same thing for anything that we do, especially when we are educators. We have to have lived it.
Back and Get It is a production of Catalyst for Harmony. To learn more about Sankofa or to join a future pilgrimage, visit catalystforharmony.org. Thank you for listening.